I'm executive director of Patriot Voices with Senator Rick Santorum. It was founded in 2012, and we really were working. Our real main purpose was to get conservatives talking about working family policy. And so, as many of you know, Rick Santorum ran for president in 2012, and he won 11 states largely because he appealed to blue-collar America in a way that really hadn't been done in a GOP primary before. And he ended up, I don't know if you know this, but won Colorado. So things have changed in a few years, yes, thanks to this gentleman in the front row. And in 2016, Donald Trump surprised everybody by turning out working America in a way that had never been seen before. In Trump, people saw hope. They saw a better future, somebody that understood the struggle of working America that really the political elites really hadn't zoned in on. So the point that I think the success Trump had in bringing out the working class was it just showed that people want to work. There's value in it. Obviously, the number one value being able to take care of your family. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what every mother and father really wants to do. But the economy has changed. I mean, my own father worked in a mill. My mother was a receptionist. They raised 3 children and saved for retirement. Marco Rubio just recently wrote an op-ed where he talked about, a lot of you have heard about his family story. His mother was a maid, his father was a bartender. He said they couldn't raise a family on that income today, in today's fiscal environment. So things have changed. It's much harder for families to make ends meet, let alone raise children. Oops, we're gonna start by, okay. When talking about families, we have to consider the financial reality. And it's really amazing to think that 44% of Americans cannot afford $400 emergency. So what does this mean for an unwanted pregnancy? Unfortunately, a lot of studies have shown that the number one reason people have an abortion, women, is because they can't afford the child. And in 2014, 49% of women having abortions lived below the poverty line. If we're pro-life, how do we say keep the baby but then don't offer any support? This graph here is from the Department of Labor that shows the decline of 2-parent households. So in mother-only families, you can see how a majority are from minority communities. So this is, and then this, you can see, I'll give you a second to take a look at it and move it. Sorry, do you need to see it? Do you see it okay? You have the idea that it's going in the wrong direction. But this graph is more important because it really shows the financial reality of what that means. It means people living really close to the poverty line, and the average is about at the poverty line, which means a lot of them are way below. So it's harder, for us to be able to stay out of poverty with the destruction of family. And so I don't know if you guys have seen the studies by Robert Putnam on the left and Charles Murray on the right where they're talking about the decline of families. It's something in America that's continuing to happen, and especially the divide when it comes to income. Families with less income are struggling to make ends meet, and their children are, as you just heard, are really struggling. And no one is blaming, no one is saying it's the parents' fault, it's the children's fault. The point is there's so little support for families, especially in low-income areas. And so that's a really big question, and one that I hope a lot of you will choose to look into as you continue your studies. As conservatives, how do we build up families? And so we definitely need to keep continuing to look at things like justice reform and poverty and all the different important topics that are out there. But the other thing we need to look at is how can we help families to start off strong from the very beginning? Just like Catherine was saying, when the concrete is soft, how can we really start everyone off the strongest they can possibly be? So we can all agree, the left and the right, that a strong family, whether it's a single family or husband and wife, starting off strong is better for the child, it's better for the parent, it's better for the community, it's better for the school, it's better for businesses, it's better for the economy. There is no downside. Yet we often just fly back through this, don't put any funding, no real thought process in this part of time of life, and the focus, as you heard, is all on the K to 12. So what we really love, and I know that Miraj has worked really hard on this, is the 2-generation approach, which is policies that, not just focusing on the baby, not just focusing on the parent, but ones that benefit both at the same time, both together and individually. And so we, I love this slide from the pro-life group. Whoops, live action. Now it's too sensitive for me. Or not.
User error.
Yeah, and this is actually from their Facebook page. Love them both. And so So much of this just fits right into the conservative community, but we haven't been leading on these kind of issues. We've been letting Democrats lead on it when really this fits right into our portfolio of issues and we should be leading on. So we have really been lucky at Patriot Voices to be able to work with Ivanka Trump's office to help build support in the conservative community. And so I had the opportunity to about a year and a half ago, start bringing conservative leaders in to meet. And we would talk about the child tax credit. And at that before time, we were talking about tax reform. And then we would segue into talking about paid family leave. And it was really interesting because so many of the people we brought in had literally never had a conversation about paid family leave. And the response was often similar, which is the person leaning forward and saying paid family leave as if it was the first time they had spoken the words. And so the responses were really varied. Like Lila Rose, I think, might have cried. Literally, she was so excited. And a couple of people would tear up like they were so moved by the idea that, wow, this we could do this. And then there are other people that hostile is probably a fair word. That the idea that conservatives would be talking about something that is government getting bigger or whatever reason that just immediately struck them as this can't be a good thing for us. And I'm pleased to say most of those folks are very supportive of paid family leave now. It's one of those things, once you do a deep dive and you see the benefit to society, and I'm going to show you some of the just top lines, are overwhelming. That as you heard even from Catherine, understanding the importance of those early years, you can't replace this important time in baby's life. So unfortunately, only 14% of private industry employees have access to paid leave. And so, like I said, we really felt like paid leave is such a great issue for working families because so many people have to be in the workforce. But as you can see, it's even less for low-income families. So, and they're the ones that really need this the most. Paid leave also is the benefits to both the mother and the baby are enormous. It's almost, I could literally fill slides and slides of this, but one of the main things that studies have shown from the Institute of Health that an increase of 10 weeks of paid leave was associated with a 10% lower infant mortality rate. That rate dropped another 13% if they're home another month. So that alone is just a shocking statistic. But women who take leave are less likely to experience depression and have improved physical and mental health. And of course, we all know the bonding effect on children. So many studies have been we've seen with the mother and the baby how important it is for both of them to have that lifelong bond. But I just want to throw out too that stay-at-home moms' financial reality that's not always an option. Obviously, it's great when one of the parents can stay home and take care of their child. No one's saying we need to come up with some sort of government program or some sort of way to replace that. But the reality is, as we talked about that first slide, is it's just not an option for a lot of families for a lot of different reasons. And so how in this new financial reality do we continue to be able to help families? So this economic reality means this, that 23% of all mothers, almost a quarter, go back to work within 2 weeks of having a baby. I cannot even imagine how heartbreaking that must be and how difficult it would be for them. And as you can see, that 40% of all households, the mother's the primary breadwinner. So they're in a situation where they have to go back to work. And one of the key points that I think we need to make is that, as you can see, 48% of all mothers with incomes under $30,000 go on public assistance after the birth of a baby. So if we can somehow keep them connected to the workforce, then they're going to have a better outcome for themselves, for their child, and be able to increase, have that chance at upward mobility that really will only exist if they stay in the workforce. Some of the most exciting research we've seen recently is the bonding with fathers. Not to overemphasize this, because obviously the bonding with mothers is huge, because everyone has always talked about the hormones that women produce when they give birth, when they're breastfeeding, but they have found those same hormones with men when they're home with their babies the first few weeks. And there's a professor at Princeton University that gets all excited explaining to this. That would be great for any of you guys to have talk about how much this changes the course of the father's life, the child's life, to be involved in those first few weeks. And so we know that when fathers are around those first 2 weeks, they become smitten with their child, and then they're more likely, studies have shown, if they take leave, they're more likely to be involved in child-rearing activities. And then other studies, separate from those, show that fathers that are involved in child-rearing activities stay involved in their lives longer. And there are other studies, of course, that show that children that have involved fathers do better academically, they do better emotionally, they're more resilient. So, so many different reasons why we really should do our best to have those parents be home and fathers be a part of that process. So the other thing is really business. In California, they've had paid family leave the longest, and the U.S. Department of Labor did some research on that. And it's really shocking to take a look at how businesses responded to the paid family leave there so positively. And there's a lot of fear that it would have a negative effect on business, but it's been really positive. So this is a really, really important point that paid family leave could also have a big impact on, is really changing the birth rate in this country. As you can see, in 1960, the birth rate was 3.7 live births per woman. As you can see, it's dropped to a low of 1.76 live births per woman. So we need a replacement rate of 2.1 in order to keep our population for budgetary reasons. So what this means is all of you are going to pay more taxes if we don't get more children. And for your retirement, if the next generation doesn't have any kids, there's no one going to be paying for your retirement. So again, there's so many different reasons. Some studies have shown that paid family leave is listed as one of the reasons families are choosing to not have more children, because it is expensive. I know we were talking earlier about how 33% of the states, childcare in those states is higher than state college. So, you're paying more than you will pay when you go to college to have childcare. It's just such an expensive thing. So how can we change this, and how can we approach this from a conservative standpoint? One of the things at Patriot Voices, the reason we started getting involved in policy, we're working on healthcare and a lot of different things, is because what we've seen is so much of the time these kind of policies, those of us on the right, we just feel like they're not in our lane, so we just stay away from them, and then we're not at the table, and then things happen we had no say in policies that we didn't get to help craft. And so, there are so many great policies out there, whether it be education or all sorts of working family policies that, as conservatives, we should be leading on. We should be deciding what these look like. We're really excited about the Economic Security for New Parents Act, which is a new bill by Marco Rubio. And as you can see, it's a paid family leave bill that really has no cost, because you would take your own leave out of your Social Security and then you would just retire later. So it doesn't expand government. What it does is it simply adds a flexibility to government. So it is around 70% of salary. And the neat thing about the transferability that I think Senator Rubio is so excited about, but that so if each parent has 2 months, then they could both take the leave, but one of the parents can go back to work after a month, say, and the other parent stays home for 3 months. So there's flexibility. They can decide how they want to do it for their own children. And the other thing is it's optional. So if it's not something you want to take or you need to take, you don't have to take it. But for those families who are having a child is a financial catastrophe, and here we're like wanting parents to cherish that child, to want to invest in that child, to want to sacrifice for that child, and having the child literally ruins their lives, because now they lose their jobs, they lose their home, they can't make ends meet, and the financial stress for couples. If we could provide that kind of support where they're able to draw these funds, and it could really make a huge difference. The other thing that I think is important to note is, in terms of most of these very generous federal paid family leave plans that are out there, they're connected to FMLA, which is the Family Medical Leave Act that was passed 25 years ago, that protects jobs, but it only applies to employees that work for firms with at least 50 employees, and they've had to work there for over a year. So those plans, while they sound really generous, they don't help this very community we're talking about, which is sometimes the gig economy, or people have part-time jobs, or a lot of people that are in minimum wage work, or that haven't worked someplace for a year, or as some places don't, so they don't have to play Obamacare, don't put people on full-time, so then they have 2 part-time jobs to try to put it together. All that entire community we're talking about helping would not be have the benefit of those plans. So this plan is unique in that it really does go all the way across the board and kind of help really the people that we feel like all of us need to be able to invest in our families. But when we're looking at poverty and looking at how we can really close that achievement gap, a lot of it is just helping all families, no matter what kind of income they have, no matter what class they're in, that they would be able to pull together and really be able to do the best for their child and really stay connected to the workforce and stay on a path for upward mobility. And, everyone benefits from this.